Welcome back to a new video. Today we are learning about type checks, casts, and smart casts in Kotlin. So say for instance we have a variable, our variable here. So our variable is assigned to a string value, so the inferred type by the constructor is obviously a string. But what if we want to assign other data types to this variable, to the same variable here? So if you try this to assign it to, for example, a string, an integer value, or maybe a boolean value, you would have an error because the variable here expected a string, because this is the initial inferred type for it, and you give it in the other data types. Okay, so how to make our variable here more flexible and accept more data types? The way to do that is to assign or to set the type explicitly to any. And any here, and you can see also we got rid of the errors. The any here is a data type or a class, which is the parent for any classes in Kotlin, even the classes that you make. So for instance, I'm going to make a class called person, and we just going to open the body of the class. And you can see here we do not extend or inherit from any other class. Though if we press Ctrl O, we would see that we have three functions that we can override within our class. You can see even we have the override modifier. And whenever you have the override modifier, know that these functions or these members come from a parent class. So what is the any class here? So as you can see here, this is the any class. It's an open class and it has these three functions, which are also open. And you can see in the document comment that it says every Kotlin class has any as a superclass. So any Kotlin class extending from the any class. That's great. So that's why we are able to assign other data types to our variable right here. Now, say you want to do something with your variable. You want to, whenever the variable is of type string, you want to append another string here. Whenever the variable is of type int, you just want to add maybe 10 numbers to the current number. Whenever it's a boolean, you just want to reverse it to be whatever, if it was true, just be false, if false, true, and so on. So the way to do that is with type checks. So to do that, we would just check the type before making any operation. Great. So you could do it with the if else or the when block directly. And as you have learned in previous videos, in the when block, you provide the variable that you want to compare it to the conditions. Great, so open the when body, and here we check if the value of this variable is a string or a number or a boolean. And the way to do that is with the is operator or the is keyword. So the is here, we are just talking to the compiler now. We're gonna say if this variable is a string, then I want to do the following. If this variable is a boolean, I also want to do that. And if it was an integer, do that. Here we missed the arrow, and now we are set to go. So here, whenever the value within the variable here is of type string, we want to append other string. So what we're gonna do is make value is equal to value plus coding, because here we have astros, and I want to append coding to the old value. Great. And whenever it's a boolean, I want to reverse the boolean. So value is equal to value, but here we append not. And whenever it's an int, just we're gonna add 10 numbers to it. So value is equal to value plus 10. That's great. And whenever we check that, we want to print the value. So value, and let's run the program. Here we could see that it was of type boolean, as the last thing we did on this any value was to assign it to a boolean value. So it checked if it was a boolean and it just reversed the value. So what if it was a string? So I'm just gonna assign it to a string again here. So values equal to the string, and I'm gonna run the program again. Now we see asterisk coding because we appended astros to coding in the when condition. The last thing to do is just to check if it was an int. We're supposed to get 11, and here is the result. So this is how you would check for the type of your variables or return type of a function, for instance. Now we know how we can check for the type of any variable with the is operator. Before we proceed, I want to have three notes about the is operator. The first thing is that it returns a Boolean value, so true if the condition is satisfied, false otherwise. The second thing is that the is operator takes two operands, not only one. As you can see here, we have only one operand, but the value here is considered to be the first operand for all the conditions. So if you want to write it in another form, you're going to get this here, delete the parentheses of the when and the parentheses, yes, of the when, and add the value in all these conditions right here. Now, if both of these of, of both of the operands are of the same type, then the condition is true and we proceed within the condition's body. Similarly for all the other or other conditions as well. That's great. The last thing is that you can handle the is operator just like you handle the logical operators. You can add the not operator and it will be reversed. So when value is not a string, do the following. Now let's understand what happens when any of these conditions evaluates to true. So I'm going to start with the first one, for example. So when the value is a string. So when the value is string, within this or within these closures here, we handle the value as if it was a string. And the compiler automatically cast the value or convert the value to be of type string rather than of type any. So for instance, you know that the length property is only available or it's available on string class and not boolean or int class. So here we could print the length, but within the boolean closures we cannot because the length is not a property of the boolean class as well as the int class. So within these closures, the compiler does the smart casting, something called smart casting or smart conversion. So it just converts the type of the value from any to the value that has been evaluated to true with your condition by using the is operator. So also keep in mind that this is what the is operator does, and this is how the compiler handles this. Also, we know that the if condition must be of type boolean, so we can within the boolean condition we could just write the value here, and it you can see it accepts the value. But if we try this or if we try to do this in the string, we would have the following error because we cannot add a string within the if condition. So before, you didn't have to do anything. All you got to do was just checking for the type, and the compiler by itself converted or casted your variable's type to your desired type, which was called a smart cast. But what if you don't want to check for the type? You want to cast it directly by yourself. For that, we are going to use the explicit cast, which consists of two types, unsafe cast and the safe cast. So we're going to first start with the unsafe cast. So here I wish to print the length of my string. So my value here is of type any, and I'm sure that I saved the string in it. So I want to print the length of my string. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to println value dot length. But we don't have access to the length here as the values type is any. So we have to first convert it to a string. So for that, we're going to learn about new operator, which is called the as operator or the explicit cast operator. And here I'm going to say value as string. So here I just converted value to string, and to access so to handle this as a string, we're going to add it in a parentheses or more parentheses here. Now after the parentheses, you just call length. And as you can see, the compiler will give you a warning seeing that this casting will never succeed because the last value in this variable here was saved as an integer. So whenever you run the program, we are going to have an error or a terminating error. Class integer cannot be casted to a string. So instead of that, we are going to use the save cast. And the save cast, you could add the as operator and the question mark. So whenever this cast here fails, it will return null instead of terminating your whole program. And now this string O might be null, so it might be a nullable string. For that, you're going to add the save call operator, which is a question mark, and we run the program. So whenever this casting here fails, we get null instead of having a terminating error that will terminate our application. You could also use casting with your classes that you inherit from a superclass, for instance. So here I have a class, just like the old example that we used in our inheritance videos. The developer class, which is an abstract, has one property, is a weapon of type string, and our two classes here inherit from the developer class and override the weapon string. And both of these classes or the child classes have their own properties which have no connection with the parent class. So here I have declared both of them to be of type developer as the parent, and whenever I want to print, for example, the 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 property of the Android developer, I can't because it's not within the parent. So can develop with Java, I cannot. So for that, I have to cast it first before accessing that. Or I just delete the type and I'm able to access that, but I just set the type to be as the parent just to show you how you can cast with classes as well. So here, I'm just going to say underdev as an Android dev, and don't forget to add the parentheses. Then you will be able to call the can develop with Java. Similarly with the iOS dev, so iOS dev cast it to iOS dev, and then we can access can develop with Objective C property here. We only took a short break from making videos about classes, but don't worry, there are more to discover. In the next videos, we're going to learn more about classes. I only had to make this video because we had to understand some concepts like casts and type checking before we learn more about classes in Kotlin. Thank you for watching, and I hope I see you in the next video.